delete that one. That one's got deleted.
Kyle,
I forgot that.
you ready? All right, it's 2 o'clock. We're going to go ahead and get started discussing the budget. Kyle's got a presentation to walk through, and then we will ask any questions that the council or mayor has, or really anybody, and we'll go from there. So Kyle, go for it.
Okay. Thanks for everyone for meeting.
Real nice today.
Thank you. Appreciate that. First, I want to start. I did this last year, but I want to start by thanking all the department heads and everyone that worked on this. I get to stand up here and talk about it, but it's not just me that does this. So everybody else that helped and worked on theirs, you know, they deserve the credit too. So you can go ahead and hit the next slide. So, and stop me as I'm going through this if you have specific questions, and we can make this a collaboration. So this slide here shows kind of an overview of all the various funds that we have budgeted for. The general fund, which is going to be our biggest, and then all the others. In your folder, you'll have a cheat sheet I printed for you all. That's from our financials. This one here, it will kind of give you a guideline on some of those others, on what you can spend the money on. If you ever have questions, I know I've answered that before, so it's there for you. Next slide. All right, so most of this discussion is going to be around the general fund. It's kind of the meat and potatoes of this. We can kind of deep dive in some of the others if you'd like, but the majority of the conversation for this presentation is going to be around the general fund. So, general fund FY23 proposed budget. Revenues total $78,718,980. Expenditures total $75,656,444. So that creates a surplus for you all to hopefully fill with some of the P2 lists that we created.
Sorry to already interrupt. That number is including maybe there's some difference in the previous pay plan to what was proposed.
So my number I just gave you is not going to reflect what you have in your binders, because we've made
the change.
Yes, we've made changes to the pay plan, which decreased the cost. So you're going to see this number here is larger than what's in your binder.
Gotcha.
Okay. So the purpose of the surplus, we went through the process with all the department heads. A lot of capital asks, didn't really say no. The instructions we gave to them was we would move it to the P2 list. We'll hopefully have a surplus, which we do, and we'll recommend that you guys go through that list and hopefully fill the gap. Okay? Next slide. All right, so here's a little historical on the general fund revenues. Just kind of give a visual on how we've progressed. I know we've had some conversation recently about the economy and where we're going. So you can kind of see the little bit of, it's not a decline, it's not as great of a increase there during that COVID year. And then we kind of skyrocket off the last 2 years. So from here, I'm going to highlight some of our bigger revenue sources. I think it's kind of important to touch on these and give some color on where I came up with my number that's in the budget. So sales and use tax, that makes up over 50% of our general fund revenue each year. And you'll see there in that bottom left corner, we projected at we're projecting to be at $42 million at the end of the year, and we budgeted 40.3. So I spoke about one of those safeguards in there to kind of buffer us in case the economy were to kind of tick back a little bit. This is what I'm referring to. The projection for the end of the year is based off of August 2022 actuals, which are showing year to date a 10.83% growth. Next revenue source is our business license. Keep in mind that our business license revenue is generated off of a fee schedule that's determined off of the previous year's gross receipts.
Let's see, you sure? Or is it Simplified Sellers Use Tax?
Get the printout that's in your folder. Wrong one.
No, he doesn't. It looks the same.
He got That's a different version. I made some changes.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry. I want to touch on our revenue manager, Lori. She's done a very good job. She's been here almost 2 years now, I think 2 years. And her ideas and her team have really come together, and I think they've aided into some of this increase in the revenues as well. Keep in mind, there is a direct correlation between our sales and use tax and this business license revenue. As we see a greater revenue in sales and use tax should be reflected in gross receipts, which would then be reflected in our business license revenue. Next slide. Simplified Sellers Use Tax. This is the internet sales tax, if you want to call it, that we've talked about. You can kind of see the crazy, insane growth that this is happening. I think COVID has really kind of kick-started this to be something we really need to take a look at. This is the flat tax rate, the Amazon, the money we get that goes to the state and gets divided up a whole bunch of ways. I know we're a part of the Big Ten Association, and this is one of our hot topics that we're talking about. I think it's going to be, it's not just a Decatur issue. It's not really an issue, but the 8% obviously indicates we're losing out on potential sales tax as if you were to go buy from our brick and mortar. Also creates a competitive disadvantage for our brick and mortar. I know I see you shaking your head because you own a business. Just know we're having conversations with our Big Ten Association to hopefully create some legislative action that will correct this, because I do see this continuing to keep going up and up. As, I mean, it makes sense. Everyone's buying online. If you can avoid going into a store, they're doing it. So just keep an eye on it. I wanted to bring it to your attention.
So just for clarity, currently the ADOR, or Department of Revenue State, they distribute these funds based on the size of the municipality.
Correct.
And what Big Ten is working on is that whatever you generate, you get.
Yeah, so there's going to be, still nothing's really concrete. There's some type of strategy we're trying to come up with to make it make sense. You know, I go back to a conversation we had. The state's really putting a lot of money into the broadband infrastructure, which indicates there are a lot of rural municipalities that don't have internet or have access to do it, but then they'll get a cut of this type of revenue. So it really doesn't add up to make it make sense. So I think the Big Ten's position is that we truly get the revenue that we're generating by our citizens. And right now, we don't think that that's accurately happening.
Thank you.
The next one is our lodging tax. You can see a nice increase there from 20 to 21. Projecting it to be finish around 2 million, and then budgeted 1.9. Keep in mind that this is shared with our Convention and Visitors Bureau, who gets 64.5% of these revenues collected. So this 1.7 isn't truly what we keep. We only keep 36.5% of that. Okay? Next slide. What I wanted to do here was kind of show you a split and kind of where we're going in our 3 buckets I always talk about. So you'll kind of see a little bit of fluctuation from 21 to 22. That personnel number is going down to 61%. Flip side is operations go up a little bit. You can go next slide. And then in 23, we dip down to 59 and up to 40%. That 1% capital is down because typically we have the 600K with our police vehicles in the budget. We did that early this year, so it's not in there.
We did that out of unassigned.
Correct. Any questions so far? Good? Okay. This slide here is just an overview of each department, kind of group some of them together just to give a reflection of our total general fund budget. Here's how much we're spending in said places. I think a lot of times we just see numbers and it doesn't really reflect what investment we're making into the city, and this kind of paints it out nicely. Okay. Next slide. The school fund, again, just makes sense that as our revenues increase, our school fund contribution will increase. Just kind of, again, painting the picture of, the whole purpose of this presentation is to make a clean and simple representation of what the city is investing in. And so here we have the school fund, and we are making a huge investment into our school fund, and hope.
You
Okay,
can go back one.
go back one.
Yeah.
Okay,
Sorry.
go back one.
Can you just talk about the debt service number of 6.1? And
Yep.
we talked a little bit about this, and you said that 6.1, there's also some debt service outside the general fund.
Yeah, it's not significant. There are some of that debt that's parked in our room occupancy and then our sewer fund, which we don't have a formal budget for the sewer fund. The majority is, I guess, 6.1 is probably a decent representation of our total debt service.
Do you
but
think it's below 7?
oh yeah, for sure.
That is extremely low
Well,
for a
that's-
municipality.
When you brought that up, that posed my question of, do you have any, and I know it's hard because no two municipalities are the same.
Yeah.
Do you have a comparison to what, other cities the same size as us may have as a debt service?
I don't off the top, but I guess I can comment on, recently we went to bond and there's an interview process and they talk about our debt service ratios. And, they had nothing but high praises to say that. Johnny Dill, who's our bond counsel, he's always complimentary on our financial position when we do go to bond. And so when we structured that last bond issuance, we did it in a way to where we were just paying interest until another instrument rolled off. And the purpose of that was to keep that total debt amount consistent throughout the years. So as we see projects come about, Dane brings developments, a 3M settlement, we may need more money for things of that nature. We have the flexibility to potentially go to market again and borrow if need be.
I think Johnny would say 15 is considered moderate.
Yeah, again, I think it's opinionated. I don't.
It's easy for the guy selling the
Right.
product, but I think that
I think it would
he
be
could prove
interesting
that.
to look up.
Looked at surrounding cities. and
Because,
stuff. When
years
rates
ago,
go up.
our debt service and what we had on the books as borrowed compared to others was, I'm not gonna say it was a fraction, but it was
It's
so
that
much.
number still is.
Probably still is
It's
really low.
so much lower with,
Keep
with
in mind,
others.
it's, in my opinion, it's not wise to just go borrow a bunch of money, and they don't want us to do that either as a municipality.
I'm just pointing it out.
I think if you have the right need and the timing makes sense with the market, rates are now increasing. They're still way below historical precedent, but they are a lot higher than they were when we locked in at like 2.5 a year ago. So keep that all in mind. Again, I think you're right, the debt service ratio, the percentage is low, but it's designed that way so that when we have the right opportunity, we don't have to say no.
I really pointed out for two reasons. One is that the issue you brought up, which is if there became a need to go back, it looks like based on that number we could.
Yes.
The other is it just shows the financial position the city's in. That includes your debt service, which is very strong.
Right.
So,
Very true. I won't beat a dead horse on the school fund. It's where we're at. Again, they get a quarter of our sales tax. They do get portions of some of the utilities money that we get from DU, and I think there's a couple other small ones. So they also, I will note this out, they also are contributing out of what they receive to some of our appropriations. They did that in the past. Just make note of that too. They have to be tied to school, student-related things, so you'll see things like the Boys and Girls Club, the library, I think the Decatur Youth Symphony is another one that's in there.
Aren't they also the only one in the Big Ten who receives 25% of the SSUT?
Very good. Yes, they do receive 25% of our SSUT, and that is, we are the only in the Big Ten that do that.
And then at the last park, they were the fourth highest municipally funded system in the state.
Okay. All right. This slide here just gives you a reflection of some of those other funds. Go back to your cheat sheet so you can understand what we can and can't spend. I know, Jacob, you had a question about the personnel board. I was taking it as you were just what that is. Is that?
Yeah, can you get to
So it has to be it has to be reported separately because they have a separate board that votes and kind of governs what they do. So it's essentially a department of the general fund, because literally however much we budget in that fund is a transfer from the general fund. It's just reported on its own.
But what are those expenses? Just
They're all they're all in the,
but just give me like
so like tuition reimbursement, all of the HR departments, personnel,
right, because that structure.
recruiting services.
It's like I get you now, but that was my first thought, but that's not it. The salaries, it's right. It's all those other things.
They do have
There
some
is.
payroll costs. It's the HR departments,
It's just the
personnel,
department
just them. They're in that
does
fund.
within the
But it
department.
also includes all the expenses for
Correct.
recruitment, including
Yes.
physicals, exams, workers' comp.
Yeah.
insurance,
So a lot of the kind of overall umbrella services that HR provide, all those costs are in that fund.
It's like
Right.
all onboarding, yeah.
Okay? All right. Quickly touch on Point Mallard and landfill. Point Mallard has a projected revenue of 4.8 million with expenditures of 4.7. So great to see that there's a little bit of potential profit there. And then the landfill is pretty flat. I know Miss Wanda's gonna have a slew of big expenditures she has, which she's completely able to do. She has a pretty large stack of cash in her fund that gives her that ability. And then we're close to having to close, I think it's cell 15 is what it
Yeah, there's
is.
a couple of cells that are having to be closed and then some large equipment purchases.
And the closure of the cells is gonna run you, $7-8 million. So she's in good shape. But that's why that expenditure cost, if off memory, I don't think there's a lot of the closure costs in there that'll come, but I think some of the big equipment expenses are in that expenditure amount, which is why you're seeing a not as big as gap as normal. But business is still good at the landfill. All right, this slide here is more for informational purposes. Met with the mayor and Jason to talk about this. So we're proposing on October 1st to start reporting Point Mallard as part of the general fund, so not an enterprise fund. So they'll be operationally and administratively treated in the same fashion as our other parks, such as Wilson Morgan and Jack Allen. So your questions is why make the change? And to answer that is kind of multiple folds. There are, not to get you in the weeds on this because you'll fall asleep, there are 3 governmental accounting, auditing, and financial reporting criteria that say you have to report this as an enterprise fund. Point Mallard does not meet any of those. We currently voluntarily report this, in my opinion, in this fashion with little to no benefit, and I think we're wasting resources on splitting out costs and time between enterprise and general fund reporting structures. So what this will do will improve efficiency for my staff, Herman, Rochelle, and Jason severely with operational activities related to Point Mallard. And lastly, this is 100% supported by our independent auditor who's been briefed and discussed with this. So,
I want to thank y'all for looking into this. I think this is one of those things that, it's been done this way for so long, but there was a reason to make a change, and primarily for B and C alone. So my hat's off to y'all for looking at this and figuring out a way to get this done.
I'm assuming Herman has said this is good.
Not yet.
I've looked for a resolution or an ordinance that says it needs to be reported X. I have not found anything. I've looked around other municipalities that have enterprise funds. My interpretation is that this is a reporting choice. This is a finance accounting choice. And so I choose to do this so that you guys are informed of this decision, because really what'll happen is things will still be treated in the same manner. The only difference is when they come for capital, they'll have to come and it'll be out of the unassigned fund balance, not the enterprise fund.
So I think we still will track profitability of the aquatic center, golf
Yes.
course.
So essentially,
There will be some difficulty, although there already is, in really tracking that. Because I think, for me, and Jason, we've talked about this probably several times, and everybody has, probably forever, but we understand, Point Mallard's an amenity, a quality of life type thing for our residents and also visitors. And we can use principles like last year, I know, and this year too, but there were a lot of ideas about, let's offer this to try to get more people to come, or as an added, the cabanas and those type of things. So you're using marketing and business principles to make it as profitable as we can, although we know we may or may not break even on some of those items. So, which is how we want it. So, yeah.
go ahead.
We're also doing that on the Parks and Recreation side too.
I was about to say.
Yeah.
Yes.
So really, what this is, this is a way for us to, it's a quality of life park, just like Wilson Morgan Park, just like the others, that will run in the most efficient, best from cater fashion we possibly can.
Yeah, he said it much better than I did. We want it to make a bunch of money, but
Obviously.
yeah, but it's,
If it doesn't, it doesn't.
if it doesn't, we're still good.
Cover our costs.
All right, moving on. Okay, so last year I did the presentation for the first time, and I had the opportunity to do an interview with a reporter, and she asked me the question, what can the Decatur citizens be excited about? And it kind of stuck with me because it caught me off guard, and I had to kind of think of some things on the fly. So I thought this would be good to kind of go through these things, because I think this will be good for you all to not sell, but communicate with your constituents on what they can be excited about.
I'm guessing paving's on here, right?
Yes, it's
Yes,
right
it
there, buddy.
is.
Infrastructure improvements. So I'll just run through this list quickly. There's a $1 million infrastructure reserve. What that means is we're open for business. We are, Dane comes to me more than probably, he's doing a great job. He's coming to me a lot because there's a lot of interest in Decatur, which is a fantastic thing. This gets us in a position to where if there's any type of sewer expansion, roads, things of that nature, we have some money set aside ready to act on that and act on it fast.
That's even better than my 1% request.
Well, we did this last year.
I was gonna say, this is,
That's over the
you
1%.
need the credit for this one.
No, I was thanking him for this.
Okay. Next point, $1 million grant match. Yes, this was approved approved in this year, but because it's a grant, it's going to be roll forward. We will have a roll forward resolution like we always do, but this one is in our budget now because it's grant related. Okay, so that's exciting. That's exciting for citizens because we hear a lot about the traffic on the bridge. Obviously, there won't be a bridge built next year, but this is the stepping stone to get down that road. Okay. There's been $10 million in ARPA funding dedicated to road safety. So projects with Upper River Road and Highway 67, widening of Modus Road, and Red Bank and US Highway 31. The Bibb Garrett Highway 20 improvements. Drove through there this morning on the eastbound lanes. They had the overpass covering the road now, so you can kind of see it visually. But what that does is it will spark residential and commercial growth for our city and also make that safe place to drive. It's been notoriously not safe, and this will benefit that. And lastly, y'all's favorite, $1.24 million in resurfacing of project citywide. I don't want to say that'll be all we do. You guys have a history of asking for more at mid-year. I'll be fully prepared to do that as well.
I don't know who you were talking to about favorite, but it wasn't me.
I know this isn't necessarily
Love
the
paving.
prettiest, most, I'll use the word sexiest thing for a citizen to get excited about, but this is a domino that has to happen for
critical
new
things.
people to come to our city, which then afford us to be able to go get the bowling alley, the amphitheater, the whatever, something exciting, that entertainment things that citizens are looking for.
And I think that's so important, because so many times I'll see, well, all the city does is bring in car washes and burger joints. We have nothing to do with that. I mean, what it is everything is based off of population and residential growth, and this is the building blocks for those things, so we can see, just like what you said.
I think it's very sexy.
I didn't have a better term, so sorry. Next point, city services improved. In this budget, there is a 6% pay increase for our city employees. What that does is allows us to be more competitive in our job market. And the key point here is to attract talent and retain our valuable, experienced employees. What that does is it improves our services for our citizens. That's important. The second point, I know we talked about the P2 list. If you were to entertain this piece, I know Daniel's here and we've worked hard on a kind of a life cycle plan for his garbage and loader truck fleet. We won't have the problem we did a couple months ago where, you know, we were behind and it was kind of the perfect storm with equipment breaking down, which led to employees leaving and resigning. And so what this will do is kind of avoid us from being ever put into that position again with a model that we've come up with that's in your folder here. You can kind of see it's over 3 years. It's very similar to what we do with police, just that constant investment to having that newer equipment. And it's important to think about because these trucks run every single day.
Kyle, just if you don't mind, for those watching by YouTube, remind us what P2.
So P2, in the budget process, we meet with all of our department heads and we're open to entertaining any type of project or capital spend that they deemed could be beneficial to their department. I call it the wish list. What we did was instead of us kind of humming and hawing on what we think is important, it's kind of counterintuitive when at the end of the day it's council's decision. We create a nice, easy bulleted list, department, the need and the cost, and let council decide on which P2 project they want to put into the budget. And so that $2.3 million investment, which is not really 2.3 because we'll sell some others, so it's really about 1.3, is one of those items. And then the second point is taking a similar model of life cycling our assets and looking at our city fleets. And there's another page in there that what our staff, this page here with the red strip, this is a list of not all, but some of our worst fleet vehicles. These are cars, trucks, and SUVs. And so credit to the finance department and those people. They worked their butts off on coming up with statistical approach to which fleet vehicles we should look at. Instead of it being a want from a department head, we really try to put some stats to who's are really in the worst shape. So this sheet here is just showing you the poor, that's the PO, poor condition vehicles. And then you'll see the total maintenance cost, which that's maintenance cost we spent on garages outside of our own garage, okay? And then there's the mileage on there. So just to give you an idea of how many there are and which departments they're in and things of that nature, should you choose to do the 500,000 or a million or 200, whatever it may be, okay? All right, next slide. The third point for why you should be excited is city enhancements. So we were fortunate to receive a $42.2 million settlement from 3M. And what that means is I'll call it a super recreation center at Wilson Morgan Park. I think there's been some renderings of a potential master plan that's been shared so far. Looks really awesome, and I think it's something people will really be excited about. And then secondly, it's the softball complex off Modus. We just closed on the land last week, and so that money too will build a very nice softball complex for our citizens. And then lastly, you see all the construction downtown related to the construction of the new hotel. With that comes a parking deck. So the new hotel is awesome, but also the parking deck comes with 4 retail spaces, which could potentially be new restaurants or some sort of retail. That would be exciting for the citizens.
As well as generate some revenue.
As well as generate some revenue, yes. And then lastly, I want people to understand the commitment we make to our community with our appropriations. $2.7 million is in this budget for appropriations. Want to highlight some of the bigger contributions we make. 1.18, that's projected. Remember, that's projected for CVB because they are on a percentage based. So if we exceed our revenues in the lodgings tax, CVB's contribution will be exceeded as well. So they promote our tourism in our city and they market our city to the general public. And then the next point is a $600,000 contribution we are making to the mental health center for inpatient facility. Okay? And then that last slide is just a visual of some of the others that are in that. Noted our NARCOG with the transportation service they provide. The public library, that's our piece of it. And then another best and brightest contribution for that, so.
You know, with the best and brightest contribution that will end up, I guess they're giving a lot of attention to recruiting, wanting to recruit educators as well as our healthcare workers, knowing they have data that shows the impact that they bring, each of those individuals bring to our economy. It offers a nice return on investment.
Right. So they're in a sense a little different than some of these others. They will actually have some monetary return on that. Some of the others is you think about like the volunteer center or the mental health. There's a return on it. It's just not from a cash standpoint.
And that's coming from the water for resale, right?
Yes. Water for resale or yes, water for resale. Yes. Yes.
Do you have any statistics, knowledge of what other cities appropriate and how we are, I mean, cause I don't know of any other cities giving out $3 to $4 million.
I don't, but if that's something you'd like me to look up, I can.
I'm just curious.
I'm sure they do. I just don't know the dollar amount off the top of my head. But
Some of
that's
these on here are school appropriation.
Right.
correct. No, incorrect. That sheet that you're seeing is the general funds.
Decatur Youth Symphony,
You are correct. I stand corrected. You are right. Decatur Youth Symphony is paid by the schools.
and some of the library.
And some of the library is as well. Yes. Schools, library, Boys and Girls Club,
Yeah,
and child advocacy
yeah.
are the four. There's a lot to remember on that budget.
Nice job, Kyle.
Any questions from anyone?
Carlton,
I emailed mine. All right.
didn't know if those hand tools were.
Gives me
Sorry.
a hard time. I can print it out.
Can you,
I mean,
I'll
I
just
can
kinda go through
go
mine,
through.
Kyle, if you.
Yeah.
Um,
You have yours.
and in most of these, I think I've probably gotten answers on, but are all temporary, Parks and Rec employees, those were mostly, if not all, Point Mallard lifeguards.
I'll defer to Jason on who they
Seasonal. actually
are. I just know the amount we budgeted was off of a 3-year average.
It's like 550,000.
Correct. So we did 500K in 21 and we're at 530 this year. I don't know, Jason, I'm sure lifeguards are in there.
I think that's a simple answer. What about DYS?
Um,
Seasonal.
Again, I'm not sure exactly what they do. Essentially, all I see is an invoice with a name.
Okay.
I would have to ask Brandon on
That's like
exactly what they do.
260.
Yeah, so they did 268 last year. Year to date, they're at 191,000. And again, what we do with those type costs is, to make it simple, use a historical 3-year average, maybe have some conversation with it like we are now if it really sticks out. But again, I'll kind of defer to the department heads to give you answers on, you know, what John Doe is truly doing that costs X.
I'll skip a few because I think some of them are yours. I just want some. I don't know how to explain the contract mowing and what we mow ourselves, but I'll get to that in a minute. Can you go through and in your kind of highlights you had, you talked about fuel expense, and the percentage increase. I can't remember what it was. It's in here somewhere. But can you just talk about the methodology there? And I feel like we're probably being, and I don't mean this as a criticism, I think it's
No.
the right thing to do, pretty conservative in that because gas prices have really plummeted for like
Yep.
12 straight weeks or something.
Yeah,
just
so
talk about-
there's really not a whole lot of science to it. Again, it goes back to our historical numbers and using averages, but what we did do in this situation was include the hike that we saw 2 or 3 months ago. So you are correct, it's probably on the higher side with where we truly will come in on spending, being that gas has kind of come down, but it does give us a little bit of cushion should it kind of go back the other way. I mean, I know we really don't have control of what our gas prices truly are doing. That's, big picture economic stuff. But, we still are instructing our department heads to be cognitive of those type things when they're driving city vehicles around and understanding that there still is a pretty significant cost with fuel included in that, so.
Okay, that's good. Let's see. Do you want to go ahead and talk through a little more detail around, and this kind of gets into the P2, but around the fleet replacement plan and
Daniels or the city?
really
fleet?
both?
Okay. Yeah, so if you pull out that sheet here, and it really, this kind of concept is really what we need to strive to be doing with not just our fleets, but we did a little bit in the fire department too with some of our more expensive equipment. So,
Well, it's, I guess anything that you are going to have to replace
Right.
on a
So-
schedule.
the concept here is to A, be proactive, and B, avoid what I would call, again, a perfect storm where your entire fleet goes out in one day and you have to replace the whole lot in 1 year. So with Daniel's situation here is on the left side, you'll see the total number, and I put the year of the vehicle for both garbage trucks and loader trucks. Now, we did have a conversation about the new residential growth that we're gonna see. So what that means is more work for Daniel to have to go service those homes. So we put, I think it was an additional, I think it was an additional 2 garbage trucks and 3 or 4 loader trucks. I'd have to go back and check my notes.
On what, the P2 list?
No, on the cycle plan, it's gonna be in your folder. So what we did was, essentially, I'm trying to remember here, it's a long time ago we did. Essentially, Daniel gave me a useful life of these pieces of equipment. So I think it was 3 years for garbage trucks and 3 years for loader trucks. So essentially what that means is in 3 years, these trucks are really not worth a whole lot. They have high repair costs and they're just problems. So using that methodology, dividing 15 by 3 and 12 by 3, you should be replacing 4 loader trucks a year and 5 loader trucks a year and 3 garbage trucks a year. And so with that, we kind of came up with a model to go over what the costs were. Can really get into the weeds here because there's some specifics tied to it with the $1 per month we receive for garbage collection that's designated for these type costs. And also, Daniel found a program where we can buy these vehicles that have buyback options in them. They're not mandatory, they're optional, but really gives us the liberty to know how much money we can make off of said garbage truck we purchase 2 or 3 years down the road and factor that into our plan so that if I know I'm gonna make, $150,000 off of it in 3 years, that really reduces the true total cost of the investment each year. So this plan will go through and I can walk through it with you individually if you'd like. And it shows you the total cost of the purchase up the top there and then the funding behind it. So you have your specific revenues. You'll have your surplus of the older trucks that we're gonna get rid of. I know the used market was really hot a couple months ago. I think it's still probably relatively hot. So we can make a little bit of cash on some of the older ones. And remember too, we have a loader truck from 1995 in our fleet.
I was born in 1995.
Right. what do we call it, Old Rusty or something like that?
And
It's
you
got a
got it running.
I hope you got a
huge
better-
rust bucket on it.
Hope you got a better nickname.
But
for that.
as we get closer to FY '24 and FY '25, we're selling pieces of equipment that are from 2021. So what that means is that's gonna generate a heck of a lot more revenue on the surplus side.
What do we imagine the 95 loader truck will bring? Scrap value?
It's nearly an antique.
$14,000 is what we looked at. You can see it there in that detail.
You go park that thing in the historic district, you won't be able to touch it.
So, the $1 per month, the surplus of the vehicles, and then lastly, some repairs and maintenance. The program also comes with warranty on these vehicles. Are we listening or?
Sorry. Getting back on track.
Savings on repairs and maintenance, and even potentially some savings in our garage department. I think we have a vacancy that if we start seeing some things slow down, we may not have to fill that position, being that we're upgrading some of our equipment. And that goes towards a lot of the police vehicles. I know we're making a change to the new, to Fords from Chevys. We hope to see a little bit of improvement there. I know they've been fixing transmissions in our garage too, so they kind of all flow and work together, and you can see some indirect savings with this program.
I really didn't hear anything after we won't have to replace that position, so.
Okay. That's the plan. I mean, obviously, that's not something we can just do overnight, but it's something worth looking into.
Personnel is down 1%. I wouldn't be excited about that.
I do like the buyback option on trucks. I mean, is it favorable terms, you think, Daniel? Is it a time frame or is it a mileage-based buyback?
Well, the good part about the buyback is we don't have to do it. I'm gonna give you an example. I do have data on dump trucks, tandem axle dump trucks. We're a government entity. We get to purchase at a heavily discounted price. So if I buy a tandem axle dump truck, I can drive it a year and by my historical data, we could sell it, make 50 grand after the first year. Now, brush trucks, I know for a fact, just looking online, any of us can do it, we can Google it. We can get a good brush truck, Kenworth, what I'm spec'd out. And it's gonna cost us around 250 grand. And that's for a 1-year-old truck, in good shape. I'm not talking about steel wheels, I'm talking about stainless steel polish, looks good. And if you look at our trucks, we have them spec'd to where they're not the bottom of the barrel. But again, we are government, so we get it very cheap. So when you get these trucks, they are spec'd, the tractor we're ordering is double stacked, chromed out, looks good, but I'm buying it at $189,000. That's a $280,000 truck. And so we fully expect the tractor that we're purchasing, I will make money off that tractor. We have a 3-year plan. I fully intend in 1 year to flip it, make money, do it again. But we're using a 3-year plan because it is a guaranteed buyback program.
Through the manufacturer,
Yes.
who is it?
Not manufacturer, it's
Through the dealership.
the dealers, yes, sir. So what'll happen is, just to give you some numbers, I'll give you the brush truck, since that's everybody's, my favorite so far, that's the one I'm having the most issues with. It'll cost me about $30,000 a year with the buyback. So we purchase it, I'm guaranteed in 3 years, as long as I do normal maintenance, oil change, whatnot.
Yeah.
I get $115,000 of my money back. So that's pretty good. We do not have to do the buyback.
Right.
That is not a contract. We can sell it ourselves, which I think will probably be a little more legwork on our end, but I think will probably be best for us to do it that way.
Is there some kind of like preferred purchasing option in there? I mean, lead times, we don't know what that's gonna look like in 3 years. We do know right now lead time's pretty bad. So would you be in a situation where you gotta turn in at this point and you're waiting, it'd be drop keys, swap out?
Whenever we say to go.
Okay.
Now, I'll give you some examples. We ordered 3 brush trucks so far this year, from this supplier that we're trying to purchase. The lead times, I'm supposed to have got this truck have been built. I've got the chassis, everything's built. It's at the body shop to get the body put on. So we're waiting on, I was told 1 year. And once we get that, so we're looking at the end of October, 1st of November now. The tractor, I'll have it in January. My garbage truck, I'll have it in June. The ones we ordered from Southland, when I first started working here in January, or it might have been February, we had a council meeting. I have no ETA on those whatsoever.
And that kind of leads into the city fleet as well. I don't see Charles down here, but I still think there's still some pretty significant supply chain on how quickly we could even get a pickup truck or some sort of car, should we order it, so.
Does that include every vehicle? What would be in that fleet replacement? It
So,
obviously excludes, well, I guess it would exclude.
excludes public
police.
safety, it's essentially, excludes public safety, landfill and Point Mallard. So I guess going through these top ones, I mean, you could probably spend $1 million in Parks and Rec and do some damage on, I mean, literally their fleet's pretty rough looking at this stuff. And I've never set eyes on them myself, but going off of the data here, they meet a lot of the criteria for replacement. So I think the majority of them are in there. Some of them are in our solid waste, so some of the pickup trucks. I think a DYS has a vehicle that's in pretty rough shape. So again, this list is more or less to kind of give you an idea of specifics as well as give you the big picture that it's something we really need to start taking serious about, because again, I don't want it to be D-Day and we having to go buy 20 different trucks because every department's is blown up, and then here we are having to wait. So just kind of,
You think, but
it's
there's
an
a way.
investment I think we need to start making each year to do
You
this.
had 500.
Well, and I just threw 500 there. You guys could spend more if you'd like. You could spend less, and you're like, it's just a generic number I put in there. The list is pretty clear. It's just however big of a splash you want to take. Completely up to you. The reason for it to be in the P2 list is to give you some options. So this is just one of them.
And that's roughly 39 of them.
Yeah, and I'll send you the electronic version of the whole population of them. There are some in there that aren't in bad shape, but I just wanted to highlight the poor ones.
How do we budget for the discussion that we had Monday night that'll be voted on this coming Monday? We budget for the 6% increase, but there could be adjustments made. We just kind of have some things, you've said a guardrail or buffer or whatever is that kind of where that would come in, maybe where the personnel board might make some adjustments?
I think that would depend on, so we have volume of vacancies in police that may absorb itself with adjustments there. If it goes beyond what's budgeted, it would have to come back and budget adjustment, not specifically what those changes are, but.
Just an adjustment for payroll costs.
My vision for this, should a change occur, would be, like Rochelle said, the vacancy would kind of eat up a good chunk of that increase, but really take a deep dive at mid-year when we do the mid-year adjustment to see if there needs to be a payroll adjustment to get us finish or complete towards the end of the year.
Okay.
But yes, I guess if you're indirectly asking me if I'm anticipating that occurring, yes, that's gonna be factored into it.
What's where are we on unassigned right now? Do you just ballpark?
6.
Is some of that encumbered, or?
That's 6.
That's
When I say 6,
unencumbered.
that's available.
It's more than that, but there's some things we've allocated, haven't spent.
So when we get to the end of the year, it'll be an inflated number that gets dropped down right away because of, I use Carrie Matthews as an example. It's allocated to be spent. You don't spend it, it rolls into unassigned, and then you basically, with that rolling forward resolution, take it out right away so that we don't double dip.
Kyle, I have to put you on the spot. And if you need to get back with me, please do. We keep, in our reserve 3 months operating expense, which is around, around 20 million?
Mhm.
Yeah. How far north of that are we? We were about 15 million,
North of,
the 20.
3-month reserve.
you wanting to know how much it is? What's the question, sorry?
How much do we actually have?
20 million,
But we're north of that, aren't we?
well, we're at 20. I mean, we don't ever, it gets fluctuated based on the budget, so when we close out the year, everything rolls into fund balance, okay? And then it is restricted out of that fund balance, and it's a calculation based on 25% of the budget. So as this budget increases, that reserve increases because it's based off a percentage. So it fluctuates a little each year, but it's in the $20 million range.
And that, the 25%, Herman, that's specific to Decatur by resolution. State law requires,
Yes.
state law requires 10, right? 10%?
Revenue state, yes.
Okay,
Yeah, some of them aren't even at that. So.
right. So, I mean, as far as where we're sitting, it's
Yes.
Very conservative.
very conservative and, right.
It is also worth mentioning another safeguard should something catastrophically happen. I think it's there for that reason, so.
Do you mind just kind of helping me understand the mowing and how we do all that? It's a big line item, just curious.
I gave him the bid docs so they'll see the location and stuff.
I'm really just curious, very high level, quickly, I don't need details, but just where we're what we're contracting out, what your guys are doing, and then kind of how that works.
And I'll ask you about grunt and groan while you're up there.
Because I'm grunting and groaning, or because, the simplest way to go about it is park mowing is not contracted out. So we mow in-house all of our parks. Right-of-way mowing is contracted out. That is the largest amount that we contract. We did take over, the roads that AlDOT was doing as well. We do get some money for that, but it was, our expectations on mowing for that was not what was being done. So AlDOT was willing to pay us what they were paying to mow it, but that comes nowhere near what our expectations of what it needs to look like. So the main way to look at it is you have a mowing contract that does most of your right-of-way mowing. Then you have another mowing contract that does things like downtown. We added some litter pickup to it and stuff to that one when we couldn't find people. But you have the Superior contract does city flower beds, areas that like downtown, weed eating, hand crews, those kind of things.
That's what I needed.
Yeah.
I saw a line item for tree. We've had trees that we've had to take down, like 15,000 for trees. I think is in the budget. Is that?
And there's two tree line items. One of them
Yeah.
was an old line item off of the old beautification budget, and then there's the current tree line item, which is pretty much a replacement line item.
Okay. Is that new, or have we?
We added that one when we had the big storms that came through that got
And
northwest.
it's been about 15K.
Yeah.
Is that a good number?
It is.
Okay.
It is. That 15K, especially with new trees, that's a lot of trees.
Yeah, it's a lot.
That
Alright.
leads me to a couple other questions. And I know this is a double-edged sword, it's very hard to answer. Do you ever see us getting back to handling all mowing ourselves? Cause sometimes you wonder, could we do it in-house and save but I realize we liquidated a ton of equipment. You're talking new vehicle purchases, new trailers, increased headcount. But that's just something we hear a lot of. So what, and this, you may not be able to answer this at all, what would you estimate the startup cost would be if we were to say, okay, we're done contracting everything out, we're gonna do everything in-house. I mean, equipment, vehicles, head count.
If you told me that today, it would probably be a month and a half before I could come back to you with an answer.
Right.
When that went away, the first thing that went away was the employees.
Right.
Because that was back in '07. Those employees aren't here anymore.
Right.
So we would have to go back and look at that. We'd have to evaluate how that would work.
How challenging is it right now to hire those?
That's,
Very.
You can ask the people doing it; they're having a hard time too. So that would be one issue. The other is, and you can get into the same conversation you got into with Daniel, is, you know, the capital cost for equipment right now is, as y'all go know better than anybody, as high as I've ever seen it. The other thing is if you did put the money forward to do it, a lot of the equipment that you're talking about, it'd be up to a year before you could even get some of it. When they evaluated this, it was on a price basis. It was. And really what the fundamentals as far as how it works is how many times does it get cut per year. Now that's went up. You guys have upped it. Y'all have upped the expectations of that. And one of the things that I would stress is we always want to do the best job we can possibly do. But we have had things that have caused some difficulties this year to where I don't think you got a really good idea of what that contract is going to look like until this next operating season. And once that happens, because there's been a lot of areas that have been added to that contract and things that will be able to be done next time, like spraying and some of that stuff, that will be able to start in the spring, that will really make those things look different. And I think then we'll have a much better chance to evaluate those contracts.
You know, in this particular world, and Mr. Pike, you come from it as well. Y'all are kind of merging away from it, but these guys are really, they're competing to try to get the business, and it makes it a little easier to manage them because they want to retain and keep that business as opposed to managing your own staff sometimes. Not that we're not capable of doing that,
Right.
but it's easier to manage a contractor that wants to make sure that they're growing and
Well,
their
one of the
business.
first things I noticed when I became director was we're talking about this line because of the size of it. This is a good size line item, and it has a lot to do with the beautification of our city. When we changed that, like I say, we did more getting rid of, not having as many employees. So who's managing those contracts? That's the big thing. Who's going back and making sure that work's being done, the things that are happening? We are still going through that process now. Now I feel like we're a lot further ahead than we were 2 years ago, but that person didn't exist. We didn't have somebody that was managing those contracts, and as y'all know, those are huge contracts with a lot of area. So that's a full-time job for actually several people, much less,
The oversight.
oversight.
I think the bid document says the right of way is 450 acres.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot.
that's a lot of maintenance.
But we've got to inspect what we expect.
Correct.
That's exactly right.
We gotta hold them accountable for what we're paying for.
The expectations have to be, and there has to be that communication with the contractors. And I feel like we have made, like I say, I think we've made a lot of headway on it. The difference is we put some of these areas in the contract that hasn't come to fruition yet.
But if you made a pro-con of outsourcing, you're leaning, it's the right move for various reasons.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and at the end of the day, if we're getting cut, maintained, mowed, what we expect and what our citizens expect, and if we can do it without increasing headcount, taking on more, equipment that brings maintenance, fuel, insurance, the whole bevy, it makes sense. I just want to make sure we kind of spot check it every now and then, just to make sure we're not getting inflated.
Those contracts were in dire need of evaluation.
Yeah.
They were, and we've been working on them heavily for a couple of years, and they're going to need more than that.
Right.
Wasn't there even some discussion of like changing the time frame of the contracts, when it started, when it finished?
That is in the new contract.
Yeah, that's.
Is
I heard
instead
that.
of it being, this month to this month, now it's gonna actually be a 12-month contract
Yes.
where they can come in the off-season in some of these areas that get grown up and those kind of things, they can come in and take care of them instead of trying to cut through them during the spring and all that,
Right.
so.
And talking about mowing and what we do, we mow all of our parks. Do we have any other things that we mow or maintain throughout the city?
We do, work with, city schools, and so we help maintain their athletic fields and properties. That comes with fertilizer and cuttings in some instances.
On the issue of mowing and litter pickup, I will say, is it L&L that's doing Beltline and 31 South? L&L Outdoors?
It's craft.
Craft. There's a bunch of them in there. I will say they've done a great job. I drive both those roads nearly every day, back and forth to 2 different offices, and see them out there picking up trash and mowing regularly. I've noticed a difference. I hope others have as well.
Thank you.
And just one more while you're up here, looking through the revenue sources, the parking revenue for Jack Allen, last year we had a budget at 40, this year's 25. Now with that parking revenue, there is a repayment we're expected to make for the turf out there, and I'm seeing the, revenues drop. Do you have any, cause last year at 40, you're like, okay, well that may be conservative coming off of a COVID year, but we're off of COVID, it's dropped even further.
The expectation for that, most of your parking for Jack Allen is through large events. Those large events are on contract most of the time. What we're going to need to do is evaluate those contracts.
And the contracts that we do,
No, those will be contracts that come through the CBP.
yeah, we need to make sure that we've got somebody at the table.
That's been a discussion, and
We talked about that. I had the exact question you did, and Jason said the exact same thing to me. I think we just need to get there.
But there's some strategic considerations that have to come into play. There is, because it may be that in the line of thinking for that is we're trying to bring enough people in to fill hotels and fill restaurants and those kind of things. But I do think there are conversations to be had there.
Yeah, I mean, the Decatur Cup was Labor Day Cup was 2 weekends ago, and I think we probably had about $7,000 of parking with 2 days, and we're looking at 25. So I do think that we're using those funds directly to help offset the cost of the turf field.
Right.
Unless we're getting the NCAA Final Four of soccer. I think people can pay for parking. Right.
We need them.
Yeah.
But so to your point, some just flat say that they won't come if they have to pay for parking. Is that accurate? All that is a negotiation, yes, sir.
It's all negotiable.
And they can negotiate their way out of spending their time in other restaurants other than the city of Decatur.
You can negotiate yourself out of the deal, but you can also get the best deal you can get.
Sure.
All right, thanks, Jason. I didn't have anything else. I'll kind of go through my P2. I mean, y'all do whatever, but I think we had striping as a P2 item for bike paths. If I read that right, I do think that's something we need to do. We had 30,000 for that. I do think at some point, and we of course had a lot of conversation with Dr. Sims, but the way that the Bill Sims bike trail is now is not ideal, in my opinion. It curves back into some neighborhoods at some points where it's just not truly a bike trail. It is in certain areas, but I think we really, that kind of stuff is quality of life that everybody talks about, and I think we need to consider, I don't know if it's in this budget or we start down the road, really putting some money towards creating a real bike trail that is not sidewalks in neighborhoods. Because the ones we do have that are real bike trails, Point Mallard, Modus, there's others that they are really good. And the whole point of that is you don't have to stop. And when you're people are backing out of their driveway across the sidewalk and somebody's got a stroller and
Yeah.
it makes it not necessarily a real bike trail, so.
Fifth Avenue's a good example of that.
Yeah, all of that around the Aquadome too, once you get off the actual bike trail, you're in a neighborhood.
On the regular sidewalk.
Yeah.
Carlton, I know Dwayne Helms has been
Yeah.
we've been
Yeah.
working with the MPO, on green space. That's exactly what you're talking about. We'll be bringing that forward to council shortly. We actually went to Coleman, went through a meeting with them about green space last week. The exciting thing is there's some options that will actually tie together some of our, new projects. So Wilson Morgan, there's a green space, project there that we could do with help from, we'll get into funding sources and all that. But there's another one at Jack Allen that will tie, Austin Middle School all the way through those two neighborhoods through Jack Allen.
Kind of behind Decatur Baptist.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would just, to you as Parks and Rec Director, anything like that we can get on the capital list, we might not be able to do it today, just,
Right.
that's
It's
good
good to
stuff,
plan.
so.
Yeah.
Thank you for working on that with
Yes.
Dwayne.
No problem. Thank you.
Thanks.
So anyway, that would be one of mine, Kyle. I think the solid waste truck issue is
Okay.
one that I would certainly
Okay.
support.
I agree on the first two.
Anything from the landfill is fine with me.
Yeah, so that's gonna be
I'm
separate.
just, I saw it on the list
It's
and,
covered.
Her item,
Yeah.
her items don't affect the surplus, the 3 million I'm talking about. Her items are just on there to be supported by her own funds, so.
Fountain at Old State Bank,
I had that one.
the bridge at Julian Harris, and I mean, that's up for debate, but that has been a complaint, and I sent y'all some of those that I've gotten from multiple residents in that area, and it's been on the capital list for Parks and Rec for a while. And then we need to look at adding, probably somewhere around 10,000, it's not on your P2 list, but to assist the farmer's market with, maintenance, storage, and the new temporary market while construction of the new market is going on.
Okay.
That doesn't equal your number,
Am I
but
getting-
that's some things.
Am I getting head nods from the others on
Yes.
that list as well?
Yep.
I was good on the first two.
First two. Okay. Okay. Anything else?
And I'll also support whatever we come up with that works for a fleet replacement.
Yeah, I had
Okay.
fleet vehicles on there, and that's,
Does that
Run of it.
500 amount seem appetite? I mean, to me, that if you used a $50,000 average, you could probably do.
Here's the other piece of that. When I'm looking at this, I'm not looking at 3 million or whatever you had. There's also 6 million that's
Correct.
currently unassigned, so,
It
there's
just,
a lot
well, I
on this list.
guess my question to you all is how big a cut of the cake do you want to take on that? Because you could do a lot, or you could do.
Well, I mean, there's some things I just said that may not get two other people to support
Okay.
it, so I think, and I told you this yesterday, Kyle, there's so much on this list that there's no way I can know what's a need. There's probably a lot, the one I know is yours, because we
Right.
lived through it for about 2 months, and,
Finance committee.
so that's what I don't know. There's a
Okay.
bunch of stuff on here, that, we talked about, I don't know if you were in here, Chief, or not, but getting some of those fire things that we have to replace periodically on a rotation.
I think they're in
They're
like
in
the
the
packs,
budget. Yeah,
and
they're in
the
there.
tanks are in
Yeah,
that
80,
budget.
So-
84 too on that. I mean, I'm
Some of
fine
that
with
stuff
that.
on there, the air packs and stuff on it, some other stuff that's in the P2.
There are stuff. You do have stuff on the P2 as well. Yes.
But those stuff in P2 needs to be added to like what we talked about.
Yeah.
A yearly rotation.
okay, yeah.
So
We just,
find all of it at once.
right, so I guess that's my point, is I have no clue there's probably stuff in Parks and Rec that needs to be like that too, but these are more actual capital one-time expense things that I had, that I know we need to do.
Yeah, I'm on one statement, one comment. I think Lee should have an office. I mean, with what we're seeing from residential end and people coming in, I mean, they come in and he's sitting there in a cubicle, so I think that that would be money well spent from a presentation standpoint. And Chief Pinion, this range improvement, can you kind of touch on what exactly that is and what can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, we currently have it out, what I call it, a shelter basically out there, just a empty pad with it. We're wanting to look into close that and make that more of a training room to have out there at a range, so we can eventually start bringing more training in, not have to send out as much training, have more fire range training, and just to have it a classroom setting. It's also, on one side of it, we would kind of have it laid out as for some of our simulator training that we'd be able to bring in a car, do that. We noticed that was kind of some issues during some of our stuff that we've been, and it's just really just to try to bring in some more training and really start to touch up, and put, that area out there, kind of get that range moving instead of having to do more classes and everything out there, bring more stuff in.
So it theoretically could save money on training outside that we're currently spending on. And do you view that as a recruitment tool?
Yes, because I would love to be able to do that, and the kind of the outside area right by that new our obstacle course and everything. That way, when we do our new recruit training, our new recruit PT test, and everything, have all that inside there. I think that makes a good impact there.
I'd like to see that one on there. And then, an ice maker, big capital expense for the street department.
Didn't we just do that?
We did one last year.
For the street department?
Can't
I
the
remember-
street-
I
can't
remember
if it was
ice
street or
maker, but-
engineering, 'cause
So my initial plan thinking through this is taking everything I've heard and kind of coming up with a list and reaching back out to y'all probably tomorrow to see if that works for you all. I need to do that tomorrow so I can get the ordinance and resolutions on the agenda for Monday. So is that okay timing for you all to do that?
Yeah, and I just, again, if there's something that needs to be done, we have, it doesn't have to be in that.
Correct. Yes, I mean, I would prefer we get as much on here as possible just to logistically move but again, I understand you, and I'm not gonna be able to comment on the whole P2 list either. I would encourage, department heads, or if you have questions on certain things, to reach out to them, and even the mayor could potentially give you some color on some of those items.
So are we gonna have another one of these where we sit down and discuss it, or will it just be first reading?
It's completely up
So,
to you all.
just on that note, if something changes out of what's on the first reading for Monday, we then have to have another first reading.
Well, I know, but are
Unless
we
we're
having
gonna
a
do it
first
tomorrow.
reading?
Yeah.
We're gonna do a first reading on the budget Monday?
Yes.
Okay.
But something can change, and if it needs to change, that's fine, but then we start to get under some time constraints, but it is what it is. If we have to meet every day the last week of the month, we'll do it.
No, I think we've all had ample time to go through this thing. I was just wondering if now was the time to get all questions out there.
Yes.
I will say too, not to put a lot of pressure, because we have some time constraints on this. Again, I would love for us to put as much of that P2 list on here, but if you don't feel comfortable, you have more questions, there's gonna be opportunity down the road as well to still.
Yeah, I
address
can
these.
have you in
Keeps
mind
it out of the council meetings.
15 minutes.
So you can roll the gap forward into unassigned.
Correct.
It just has to come before on the
Yeah.
agenda.
Dane, talk to me about Paris.
You wanna go to Paris?
No.
So Paris Air Shows happens every 2 years. A lot of people hear it and say, well, it's just an air show. The Paris Air Show is the largest gathering of every nation and aerospace company in the world, and so they come there to do business. We were approached by somebody from Huntsville Airport that said, you guys should really think about going to England, which was this year. We said, we can't go. They said, then go to Paris. Well, we talked to the state, we talked to different folks from the North Alabama region that all go, so they have a delegation, and then the state has another delegation, so, once you go, I mean, you need to start getting ready right now, because you set up the meetings before you go to meet the people at the Paris Air Show.
So, I mean, I know a little bit about it with the, aerospace and all that fun stuff, but the purpose of this is to go to Paris where everybody, I mean, I'm gonna call it a trade show for dumb terms. This is a giant aerospace trade show. And what we're trying to do is get them to wanna come to Decatur.
Yes.
And, to support ULA or Dynetics and these, I know some other areas in North Alabama, well, that's a terrible example because they're chock full of aerospace companies. So maybe it's worth going. Let's talk about that a little more.
Yeah, I mean, we called Canfield's office and I talked to his administrator, said, hey, what do you think? She said, listen, I've talked to a lot of cities, they all about going. She said, and I'll tell them no, that it shouldn't be there, but she said, but y'all in North Alabama, you need to be there. So I said, okay.
The line item
Yeah,
is
I mean-
15,000.
Well,
got
the biggest thing you
18.
have in that is you have to pay a delegation fee just to go with the state of Alabama, and that's like $5,000. And then you have, there's a couple receptions that you go to, and after that, it's just your travel and your lodging for two. And I put it for two people just because it's work. I mean, you got somebody that's doing a political thing, you got somebody that's doing the business side of things. Most cities are taking a delegation of at least 4 to 5 people.
Do
Huntsville
you,
takes probably over 10.
do you see that being advantageous?
Yes.
I mean,
No.
but tell me a little bit more. Obviously you do, you wouldn't put it in the budget, but
So we, prior to COVID, we send 16,000 of our residents to the east on a daily basis to support, space and DOD. Okay? Then we have 13 square miles of what's called hub zones, historically underutilized business zones, that would offer small business entities a nice advantage when it comes to receiving discounts on bids and things of that nature. So we have the workforce here. We have the historically underutilized business zones. We have some nice advantages that we haven't been marketing. Will one trip get that done? No.
but you get your foot in the door.
It's
It's starting a
visionary and
relationship.
starting and taking advantage of, and, some communities are maybe outrunning their punt coverage just a little bit and opening the door for Decatur to get in that.
Well, that's understandable. Just when you look at it, I know it's one of those things that when you start,
Yeah.
you create that relationship, it needs to be expected. You need to continue to do it. And, and that's something we hear of all the time. Well, where are, even though we build rockets here, it's like, where's our high-tech stuff? And this could be that opportunity. That's the first I've learned about the 13 square miles of hub zones. So, okay.
Yeah, we went to the artist launch, and I was sitting next to a guy that works in defense, and I said, hey, you go to Paris Air Shows? He said, yeah, we're going. He said, when you go, he said, y'all go. I said, well, we gotta vote on it and see what happens. And he said, listen, if you guys get there, I'll invite you to this reception, and we'll introduce you to this person, that person, that person. And so, it's like you're saying, it's a process, it's a networking thing, but it's work when you get there, it's not a game.
No, if it's advantageous for, to bring new companies here, then, I'm all for it. But because that would be an emerging, I guess, an emerging kind of market that we haven't historically seen. But with ULA and their expanded Amazon contracts, they've spurred, Dynetics is now there, so what else could that lead to long-term? And, sometimes you gotta invest a little bit to see a return, but, that was just I just wanted, to go into a little bit more on that.
Yeah, and ULA also pitched us to it as well, and I think that would be part of our strategy to build off the relationships that are already here. Beyond Gravity's also here, which is right next to us.
Yeah,
Build
Beyond
off-
Gravity, they do the fair.
Build off those
Well, you got,
relationships.
Excel Tour, the same, carbon fiber,
Yeah.
they're all.
Their own aerospace and all that fun stuff. So that's for you and Hunter, right?
Exactly.
Perfect.
Unless you wanna take the space, or take the spot.
They're going to zero gravity.
Is that game plan for tomorrow work with you all?
Yeah.
Fine with me.
Okay.
Yeah. He named a couple of the big ones, but.
Does that have you a P2 list?
No, let me,
Yeah.
based on what I heard, come up with the strategy to fill that little gap. That's not
Yeah, I
little,
mean-
that gap. And then I'll reach out to you.
I think only if you know it's, or, well, you guys know it's a real need that needs to be in there. If we're not sure, we can work off of the unassigned balance, including what's the gap that we leave.
The mayor and I will meet tomorrow and hash it out. We'll present something to you all that we can come to some sort of consensus to get. And then at the work session on Monday before the meeting, we'll share those changes. You can
That's
nod your head
Yeah,
yes
that
or
works
no.
The only thing I would say is, I mean, these fleet plans eat up a
Yeah.
good part of it. Although we do expect to get something back on the
Right.
trades.
And with that plan, I will also include the surplusing and of that
Okay.
included.
I do have just one general question.
Okay.
Do you think, and this is hard to say, so you're probably gonna say, I don't know, but I'm just throwing it out there. Is it even conceivable, not for this budget, but for this budget, if we were 2 months ago, to cut 5% of expenses out of $78 million? It's $2.5 million.
If you were to ask me that 3 years ago, I would say yes, but I think what we've accomplished I say this because we used to have these long, drawn-out meetings with everybody, and it was weeks and super long, and we've kind of got it down to a science now to where, and I think some of the department heads could attest to this, it's really quite simple, and it's almost like a meet and greet, hey, are you good? I noticed these couple things, because it's all based on statistics, and we've really done a good job by using actuals to eliminate the fluff, I guess is what you could call it, that historically was in there. So I can't say yes or no, but what I just told you, I think makes me lean closer to the no side, but
So then if
it's 80 million, it's $78 million. I'm sure we can come back next year and look at how we did performance-wise with actuals and say, yeah, we could have cut 5%. But again, it's everything's so changing and moving that it's hard to say at this point that yes, you could.
And so that then leads to, if you had to have a gap operationally, you would have to do that through some other form of revenue, right? So what I'm getting at is, if you had to borrow money, go to bond and borrow $50 million, you either cut expenses, which if we cut 5%, that's $2.5 million, you could support a large borrow, or you have to create new revenue.
Correct.
And those are sales
Hard.
tax increase,
Yeah.
which I'll never support. But you do have other sources of revenue, where your lodging tax, your, the dollar you throw on. I think Huntsville supported the Orion Amphitheater through an additional tacked on, I don't know if it was lodging tax or just a fee, but that's how they're paying for that. And their justification is our visitors are paying for something that our residents can enjoy, which I think is interesting. But just something for us to think about as we continue to grow. We're gonna have need, and we can't do everything out of unassigned. You have to do it through your operating budget. So I'm just kind of throwing that out there.
Yeah, I mean, the gap was a lot larger this year than it was last year. I'm sure we could go back and meet with every department head and say, hey, could you cut 5%? And they would do their job and probably try to find a way to make it happen and make things a little tighter.
Can you get that done between now? I'm just kidding. All right, what else, budget-wise?
I'd just like to thank Kyle and the whole
Yeah.
finance staff and department
job.
heads and the mayor and everybody. I mean, because putting this thing together year in and year out is no easy feat, because, I spent hours in this thing, and, when I'd call him and he'd go, oh, well, it's on this page behind this. Golly, I mean.
Yeah, I literally called him on one thing, and he was like, "Oh, just flip 3 pages back." You'll be
Yeah,
there."
and that shows a commitment to our staff and our directors, and thank all y'all. It's a team effort. I think we're trying to do the best we can make everybody wishes come true, and it's an exciting time.
Yes,
I
very
think-
much so.
I can only speak for myself, but I have a much better process of how everything works this time than I did last time, so thank everybody for helping me with those questions.
Yeah, I would echo all that. Obviously, it's the mayor's budget to present to the council, so thank you for your work with the department heads. And I would thank you too, guys, for, you know, it's a lot to go through and find questions and ask, but it's important to do that. So appreciate the work that the council has done to try to come up with the best budget we can.
Sure.
I think the mayor had one thing, and I don't have anything after that.
My wife and I, we were going to a destination Tuesday night, and we were downtown, and a food truck was set up in front of one of our downtown businesses. And I knew that it wasn't supposed to be. Drove past it and got about a half a mile down the road and thought, daggum. And so I turned around and came back and said, man, you know you can't do this. You can't operate like this. There's a process. And well, they said I could. They being the location that he was parked out in front of. And so I got with they, and they couldn't provide any proof that they had received any kind of approval. And so they knew that they shouldn't have been doing that. But I was holding my nose while I was going through this process, because I think we're more of a progressive city than that today. And there's a time to when our food truck vendors and such, I know we've got well thought out, and I compliment our council on what's the progress that we've made to date. I think that you can have events at the farmer's market, at the Old State Bank Mall, and over by the ACA county parking lot. But maybe you guys will give consideration to looking at some other things that we can do in our city to be a little more progressive. Just didn't like doing that. He had, while he knew better, he had brought a staff in to support it and such, and hated to send everyone home, but they didn't push back any. They went home. So
Well,
That's
you know, I'd be fine with it. You know, when we did that, which was very early on, you know, it's kind of one of those things you try to make a tight mousetrap right out of the gate to see if there's going to be issues. To my knowledge, we hadn't had any issues, and also, you know, they can be on private property with the landowner's permission, but in our downtown area, I mean, you know, depending on what you guys think, I wouldn't mind opening it up a little bit, but I still think that there should be that buffer between brick and mortar restaurants. I think that's,
like a
Yeah,
distance.
and that
Right.
was kind of
And-
where
and-
that
and
came
there's
from in
one
the
in
beginning,
there.
was we wanted to
Right.
ease, this was new, we wanted to kind of ease into it, look at it. I was kind of more on the other side. I was ready to let them go, but obviously, yeah, you don't want one setting up right in front of another restaurant on the curb. But I certainly think that's something we need to talk with Lee about, and Dane, and look at those areas. I don't know if you could do it based on, I guess you couldn't do it based on zoning because of, well, I guess you could, with the exception of in front of certain restaurants or whatever. But yeah, and for me, it doesn't even have to just be downtown. I do think certainly in the arts entertainment district for sure.
oh yeah, yeah.
It's a
That's
great
where
place for food trucks, and we've
Big
seen an
time.
increase in food trucks in Decatur, which is exciting. But
We've seen them in
even
our
throughout the
parks
city,
during
so-
some of these events as well.
yeah,
We've also seen an increase in our restaurant revenues.
Yeah, I'd say, you know, I don't think the conversation early on was, they were concerned that they would take business away from our brick and mortar restaurants, and, you know, I don't think the data supports that. I think they're just fine, so.
Well, we could use some more restaurants.
Well, yeah, but, yeah, I think that argument isn't true.
Thank you. I think you guys get where we're going. Thank you. If y'all talk through that, I appreciate it.
All right, anything else from council or any department heads? Come on, Brad.
I feel really bad bringing this up since you just mentioned cuts, but there was one thing on my P2 list.
That was a hypothetical.
There was one thing on my P2 list last year that didn't happen, and I think I neglected to put on this year's, and it's that agility planner software. And this is the sexy topic of business continuity planning. And this software basically will let us do a business impact analysis, or help us do a business impact analysis, which basically helps me for planning. So we do have a disaster. What things do I need to concentrate on first? Obviously, you think finance, payroll. However, there's a lot of questions that you don't always think to ask, like payroll, if it's payroll week, but not if it's not a payroll week. Point Mallard would be very important July 4th, but not December 25th, for instance. Anyway, the good news is I think we asked about $20,000 last year, and I just got off the phone with them before this meeting, and with some negotiations, it'd actually be less than $10,000 a year. And if we were to go ahead and, this would be an addition to our existing agreement, which we already have with them about the generators for City Hall, and if you're familiar with those things, they would knock off the first 3 months of the next year. So it'd actually be a little over $7,000 for the first year. So anyway, I just wanted to let you, not pushing either way, just letting you know about that. That's something that we did
Is
not
that
add.
like purchase now and get it for the promotional price?
Yes, sir.
Only
That's a
$7,000
good way of
instead
saying, yes, that's a good way of saying it. No, actually, the 20,000, we dropped the number of users we need, and we cut out a part we didn't think we needed to bring it down to below 10,000. So that is gonna be the real price, $9,348.
Well, that's something y'all can
Yeah.
give us for.
Yeah, yeah, I just wanna make you aware of it.
Okay, thanks, Brad.
All right.
Did you have some? I thought I saw a hand back there. Oh, sorry, I'm seeing things. Anything else from anybody?
Put your glasses on, you see
I
better.
know. All right, y'all got anything else, Mayor? Good. All right, thank y'all. We're finished.
Look at that, before 4 o'clock, Carlton.